Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Adapting CDMO Capabilities to Support the Development and Commercialization of Orphan Drugs and Novel Therapies, which is brought to you by Scrip and sponsored by Cambrex. My name is Andrew Warmington. I'm the Manufacturing Editor at Citeline, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we jump into the presentation, let's go over some housekeeping items. First, if at any time you're having technical difficulties, please click on the Test Your Connection button, and this will take you to a connection checker and FAQs page. There's also a Chat Now function to support contact the support team for assistance. If you want to enlarge the presentation, just click the Maximize icon or drag the lower right-hand corner of the presentation window to enlarge. There'll be a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so if you have questions, we want to hear from you. To ask our presenters a question, simply type it into the question window on the bottom of your screen and then hit submit. We'll be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session, and if there are any extra, we'll try to answer you after the webinar via email. And because we know you'll want to listen to this webinar again, it's being recorded and will be available to view on demand in about 48 hours' time. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's session, Dr. Dan Bowles and Dr. Shawn Conway. Dan is Vice President and General Manager at Cambrex. He's a PhD synthetic organic chemist with over 20 years experience in drug development and chemical process R&D within the pharmaceutical and the CDMO industries. Dan joined the Cambrex High Point site in North Carolina in 2012 and most recently served as Senior Director of Chemical Development before being promoted to his current position. Over the past 11 years, he's helped to create Cambrex High Point's strong interface between chemistry groups and the key low lab and pilot plant operations. And he's had responsibility for the chemistry, GMP analytical, and engineering teams. Prior to joining Cambrex, Dan had served as Senior Principal Scientist at Pfizer R&D. And Dr. Shawn Conway is Director of Engineering R&D, also at Cambrex High Point. Shawn received a BS degree in chemical engineering from Virginia Tech in 1985 and a PhD in chemical engineering in 2001 from the Johns Hopkins University. He has over 20 years of experience in the specialty chemicals, fine chemicals, and pharmaceutical industries. After initially working with West Vaco as a research engineer, he moved to W.R. Grace, where he held various technical and operational roles. And in 2017, he joined Cambrex to launch their engineering R&D teams, focusing on providing process engineering support during scale-up, as well as designing and implementing continuous flow technology for API production. In approximately 5.5 years, that group has developed and implemented over 20 programs involving continuous flow, including multiple CGMP clinical campaigns and commercializations. And with that, I'd like to hand things over. Dan and Shawn, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, for the introduction. It's our pleasure to join this presentation today. I also wanted to just take a brief moment to thank Citeline for organizing this event. Cambrex is proud to take part in this event. We're very proud of the changes we've been putting in place here in High Point, and it's our pleasure to share those changes with you today. So with that, just a quick outline of today's presentation. We're going to talk through a bit of an overview of Cambrex and specifically the High Point site leading up to this transformation. Talk also a little bit about the ever-changing drug discovery and clinical trial landscape and what that means. There's been a growing need for widow orphan type manufacturing, and that leads to small volume commercial. And we believe what we're doing here in High Point fits that market very nicely. And really following that API demand has led us to make the changes that we're putting in place here. So looking forward to going through that today. So just a quick look at Cambrex. I won't spend a whole lot of time on these slides, but Cambrex, of course, it's a large CDMO organization. We have over 2,400 employees globally. We're serving over 1,000 customers, and generally, our goal is to serve from early clinical development, the analytical services, the drug development, the clinical manufacturing piece of that goes into the drug substance, as well as the end game work associated with drug product development. And in doing that, we have over 15 facilities globally to help support all the growing needs as clients such as yourselves bring compounds from early inception through commercial launch. So Cambrex has a long history of doing this. There's been steady growth over the years, and I'll hit a few of the highlights here. So Cambrex was founded in 1981. We here in the High Point facility were known as PharmaCore before Cambrex acquired us in 2016, and that was a great acquisition. It's been a fantastic journey before and since that acquisition. Cambrex continues to add capabilities, such as adding Halo Pharma in 2018 for drug product capabilities, as well as the Avista Pharma Solutions in 2019, and that's really added to our early stage clinical development, our manufacturing, analytical support, a lot of other expertise there. You see there in 2019, Cambrex was acquired by Permira, which is a global equity company, and that's really been a catalyst for additional growth. This has been a really transformative period, and Permira has strongly supported Cambrex and continued to invest, and we're grateful for that. So since then, we've really enjoyed a lot of growth here in High Point, and Cambrex overall has done the same. More recently, Q1 Scientific was added to the organization in 2022. And most recently, there was an announcement that Snapdragon Chemistry was acquired in 2023, just this year. And that really has dovetailed nicely into the work that Cambrex was already doing. So we're very excited about all these additions to the network. As Cambrex strives to serve the greater market, we're essentially divided into three main categories here, starting on the right side with early development and analytical services. This is spread out over 6 facilities. These are more your traditional earlier clinical activities, some of your medchem support, some of the early work that goes into that. Drug substance, that's where High Point resides. We're part of the drug substance business unit. And this is all the API, the drug substance, the small molecule API support, and that's spread over 7 facilities worldwide. And then finally, we have the drug product here in the middle, which 2 facilities, both in the US and Canada. So you can see that most of our work is on the right side there in clinical stage out through commercial work. So that's the great majority of our development pipeline. I won't go through all the 15 sites we have globally. I'll just point out a few, and mainly the dark blue, which I mentioned High Point here is part of the drug substance business unit. We're number 3 there in North Carolina. Traditionally, projects that would have come here and enjoyed development work here in High Point might have outgrown the facility. We maxed out at about 2,000 liter capacity in terms of our pilot plant reactors here. So batches north of 100 kilos in a single batch might have graduated, if it were, to our facilities either in Iowa, number 2 there, Charles City, Iowa, or number 14 in Karlskoga, Sweden, 2 of our larger commercial manufacturing sites. So traditionally, we've been sending maybe 3-4 projects a year to our larger commercial manufacturing sites. And more recently, we've been sending projects as well to number 13 there, which is Paolo, Milan, Italy. That's a site that's also really well known for large commercial manufacture. So really the partnerships for us are for projects that graduate out of High Point. We also work a lot with the early development sites in green. And these are projects that often come into High Point that maybe have done some initial clinical development work and maybe are ready for that next phase of development. So the phase 2 readiness, the phase 3 support batches and analytical work, the commercial readiness, if it were. So that's really our model, and that's more what I'll talk about here in a moment. So again, you could think about it in terms of breaking down into clinical phase or maybe even scale of manufacture. So some of our earlier sites on the left here would have lots more targets to work on at a given time. They might max out at 50 gallon scale. And there's a nice smooth transition into sites such as High Point and some of the sites like Longmont, Colorado that might take phase 2 programs and projects up to maybe 500 gallon scale, that 2,000 liter limit. And then, of course, High Point is moving into commercial, but our larger traditional commercial manufacturing sites like Iowa and Karlskoga, Sweden, and Milan can handle these larger manufacturing batches up to 4,000 gallon scale. So you can see here, by intent, we are developing a network where we can take smaller clinical batches and do the necessary work in the necessary manufacturing scale up to ensure that we have a streamlined process across the scale network. So I mentioned that Permira has been great for Cambrex. We have invested quite a bit in lots of our sites here, including the additions of Q1 Scientific and Snapdragon. Each of the sites have enjoyed continuous improvement and steady growth. Of course, we're going to talk a lot in this presentation about the investment here in High Point, which amounts to about $38 million over the last 2 years. But also, it's worth pointing out the improvements in Charles City, which is amounted to about $50 million, and that's really changing, adding capacity there, improving 3 large-scale manufacturing work centers there, and that's, you know, them absorbing or taking a lot of our larger volume products. It's really a nice synergistic effect there. So moving into specifics about High Point, that's why we're here today. High Point, we have 138 colleagues here in the North Carolina facility. We've always been a chemistry-based organization. We have excellent chemistry and engineering and analytical development chemists and engineers here. We do mainly GMP production in a pilot plant facility, and you'll see the added capacity we're putting in that regard as well. You can see on the bottom there, we are really a frontline organization. Almost everyone here is touching the chemistry, touching the projects. We have a lot of chemists and engineers. We have a lot of analytical chemistry and quality control folks, and very good sizable groups in operations and quality assurance. This talks to that same development funnel that I referred to earlier. The earlier development sites on the left-hand side here, including the Snapdragon team in Waltham. These folks are all developing processes that maybe are earlier in development, maybe need a little bit of work, but before it's ready to go into kind of phase 2 and phase 3 readiness manufacturing support. Those projects come in very nicely into High Point, where we can do additional development work here, whether it's chemistry or analytical or engineering support. All of that really is designed toward commercial readiness. And traditionally, as I mentioned, those would have transferred out to Karlskoga or Charles City and now Milan. But more recently, this improvement, the site master plan that we've put in place is allowing us to do small volume commercial manufacturing here in High Point for projects that don't need that extra capacity. So another timeline, and I won't spend much time here, but just to show you, PharmaCore, we were founded in '99. Brian Swearinga came and built out our pilot plant in 2007. We've only had one FDA site inspection here. That was in 2014, but went very well. It was a general inspection and no 483s. We're currently doing mock PAIs in preparedness for our first two commercial projects that are rolling through the system. So looking forward to that. I mentioned the Premier acquisition in '19, and really just since then, we've been adding a lot of capacity, and the rest of this talk really is going to talk about a lot of that current state and added capacity to the site. So I'll start with just a quick highlight about our chemical development group. Our people are what makes us strongest. Our project managers are really the core of that team. These are very experienced folks. They're all PhD organic chemists. They have countless years taking their own projects as chemists from the lab to the plant to release and beyond. And they know the answers real time. There's no lag. They are front-facing to clients. They're in the project teams. They're working with operations. It's just a really highly experienced team, and these folks are just about as best as you can find in the industry. Tied with that, our process chemistry team is very experienced. We have a great majority of PhDs within this team. The most important thing here is that the same chemist that's developing the chemistry in the lab is going with that process to the manufacturing plant. They will be standing with the process, making all observations, signing the GMP batch record. We feel that's a very important tie from the lab to the production plant to make sure there are no surprises. So with this, I think it's probably best if I hand this off to Shawn. Shawn is well-versed in continuous flow development, and we'll also talk about our operations here in High Point.
Thanks, Dan. So as Dan mentioned and briefly mentioned in the introduction, there's been a significant interest within Cambrex and within the industry as a whole in developing and implementing continuous flow processes to help with some challenging synthetic transformations, to be able to enable some extreme conditions, and as well to improve quality and safety profiles for processes. So just about 6 years ago, Cambrex began the investment into this technology with the start of the engineering R&D team here at Cambrex High Point. And then earlier this year, when there was the acquisition of Snapdragon, who was well known as the premier process development organization, I would say, around the world with this type of technology, really fits well with the overall vision and strategy of Cambrex to be able to support flow for our pharma partners in the long run. So with those two combined, there's a consistent methodology and philosophy and how to approach the development implementation of flow processes. So just a quick slide here that kind of shows what that would be, and the fact that the organization is what we call equipment agnostic, where we will design the process or the equipment associated with the process to best fit what is necessary, as opposed to force fitting something into an off-the-shelf turnkey system, which may not be what would provide the most value in the long term. We strive at both facilities to rapidly prototype for proof of concept and feasibility, and then begin with using automated data acquisition and understanding, and even sometimes some automated AI learning algorithms to get the maximum amount of data during the development phases, so that we have what's there in the larger bullet. We target practical and scalable solutions that we're going to be able to help our clients and our partners long term, all the way through commercialization. You can see here a significant level of experience and expertise across different types of reactions, as well as different unit operations that are not reaction related throughout the organization. So essentially, any type of transformation that you can think of is one that we have encountered and have worked with, either at High Point, Snapdragon, or in some situations at both. And if you look in the bottom green there, as I mentioned, ancillary unit operations, looking at workups and separation, distillation, and even isolation, all done in a continuous mode to be able to provide the most value to the client, as well as get the compound of interest to a safe and stable spot to be able to ensure quality in the long term. Pivoting a little bit and just talking about the overall operations team here at High Point specifically, we have an experienced team, which is I'll say the overriding theme of the entire High Point and even Cambrex network. We have 15 operators currently that have extensive experience throughout the industry, and especially working with equipment on our scale. We run 2 shifts essentially all week, and we have QC quality and chemistry support from the other parts of the organization to make sure that the processes are always paid close attention to and to ensure quality and performance. We obviously have the rest of the infrastructure with our warehouse facilities and the management teams associated with that to be able to shepherd the processes throughout the entire network. Before we pivot again later on the presentation and talk about the additional capacity, this is a snapshot of the 4 large suites that we have currently at High Point. Suites 100 through 400 are fixed reactor assets ranging from 400 liter up to 2,000 liter, all of which are equipped with the infrastructure, specifically agitation, to allow us to go to very low level mixing so that we can do a wide range of processing in each one of these vessels. And we are not stuck with one suite or the other depending upon scale. As such, we have the ability from there to be able to take a process, and in some cases in the exact same reactor, through multiple scales as the project grows through the development phases, and be able to carry that all the way until we get to the late clinical and even to the commercial stages. Generally, we do our isolations with pressure nouches, but we do have an agitated filter dryer in suite 400 for more sensitive materials, or ones that may necessarily be developed with that from our clients, as well as be able to directly translate to the same technology in Charles City and other commercial sites. One point to mention with Suite 100 is that is outfitted typically for our higher pressure chemistries and going up into up to maybe 10 bar as far as hydrogenation and the such. Otherwise, we are very strongly equipped with glass line reactors from a flexibility perspective. Think about the overall profile of what we work with. Here at High Point, we currently average about 60 to 65 projects per year, and that's 3 to 5 steps per project. So it's a lot of different chemistries that are going on through those suites. It's a very, very active and dynamic workplace. Our batch sizes go from grams to 100 plus kilos. We can do that from non-GMP or GMP 22 liter or 100 liter vessels all the way up to those 200 liter through multiple production batches in a campaign set strategy. We do phases 1 through 3 historically, but obviously we'll talk a little bit later about being able to support commercial launch locally and not having to do a tech transfer to another site. We are seamless support from chemistry and all of the other supporting functions, as Dan mentioned. The technical experts of a process are in the suites working with the operators hand in hand to be able to be sure that the process comes out of the lab and into the plant and is performing as expected. This is you can see the picture looking down the corridor of our existing clinical space. And the bullet points, I obviously will not read every single one of these, but gives you an idea as to the general capabilities that we have here on the site. We have, looking with the use of liquid nitrogen with our temperature control units, the ability to go to -70 C. We also have the ability to go from the separations perspective. I mentioned pressure, filtration, and filter drying. We do have large-scale chromatography capabilities. We typically try and engineer that out of a process, but if it is a requirement, we have the ability to do that on a fairly large scale. We also have the ability to do some higher level handling in these facilities. And while they may be rated traditionally down to a 1 microgram per cubic meter level, we have done IH testing using some split butterfly devices, single-use charge, and collection bags, as well as continuous liners off the filter dryer to be able to go to an even higher level on a case-by-case basis. With that, I will turn it back over to Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Shawn. So obviously the analytical piece is a huge component of supporting a site like ours. And this is Robin Spivey. She heads up our analytical research and development team. Robin has 21 experienced analytical chemists. You can see it's a good mix of degrees there. This group is divided into 2 main functions. That is the analytical project leads. These are the folks that are participating and leading the project team discussions. They're the ones developing the methods and just essentially putting good analytical science into place. There's also a team of method validation scientists embedded in this group, and those are the frontline workers that are actually taking those methods and ensuring that they're properly validated for commercial support. Currently, our analytical chemist to process chemist ratio is 1 to 2 on site. One of the other sites that I didn't mention discreetly before is just down the road in Durham. It's a former Avista analytical site. There's a plethora of analysts available there. And so any overflow work from High Point, we are putting those folks in Durham to great work on our project. So it's a really nice luxury to have. We recognize that analytical chemistry is sometimes a bottleneck, and that's not really the case for Cambrex, at least for High Point, that we have the ability to call in additional resources at any time for analytical support. And of course, these folks are well-versed in a wide variety of analytical expertise, anything that you might need for a development through commercial project. Just touching briefly on our quality control and stability team. This is Amanda Flanagan that heads up that team. We have 15 QC chemists on site. This is a first and second shift operation. They're handling all the raw material release, intermediate release, API release, as well as all the cleaning verification, samples that come through the group. All of our scientists really here at High Point are on Empower 3, and really, again, just a really nice setup from an analytical equipment perspective. You'll see a list here in a moment, but great equipment on site here, qualified to GMP. We also have stability chambers qualified across the range of ICH conditions, and we have additional options available just down the road in Durham as well. As I mentioned, the obligatory list of analytical equipment, you can see we're heavily adjuvant based in terms of HPLCs and really GCs. We have been adding Waters H-class as well to the site, and that's been a nice addition. Really, essentially all the equipment you'd expect to see here. So NMR on site, a couple of XRPDs, DSC, a lot of mass specs for kind of low ppm impurity tracking. So really just about everything you'd need here locally in High Point. So that's been very convenient. And then just wrapping up this in terms of folks supporting projects, our quality team is really experienced. We have a 14-member team, excellent compliance across all the CFR and ICH guidelines. Our controlled document management system is Master Control that handles all of our deviations, CAPAs, change controls, all the expected control here, as well as systems that help us to do internal audits, data review, materials handling. And I'll just mention we've come online just this quarter with TrackWise, and that's been another really nice improvement here locally. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to shift gears quite a bit. We're going to talk more now about really the drive for the change here in High Point. Why are we making the changes to the site rather than continuing in the same direction we have been? And really the main driver there is small volume API production. So really, what is small volume production? Well, of course, small volume API, a lot of our larger commercial manufacturing sites, quite honestly, are going to struggle to take on a purchase order for maybe making only 100 kilos or 500 kilos a year. Frankly, it's an underserved market, and we're hearing that more and more. Both our business development and really our scientists, our manufacturing operations folks are hearing that it's an underserved area for small volume commercial manufacture. So what is an orphan drug? Well, that's characterized as any compound that meets a medical need for less than 5 out of 10,000 people, or roughly 200,000 people in the United States. It's not a trivial number of people, but it's of course less than a traditional blockbuster drug that would go to a larger commercial site. And it's estimated that there are around 7,000 rare diseases today. So this is not only is it an unmet market, but it's an opportunity space. It's an opportunity to help a lot of people here. So you can see from this chart that the market for orphan drugs is growing fast. It's estimated by next year that 29% of pipeline drug sales will be from orphan drug sales alone. Cambrex has recognized this need and is shifting to support this growing demand. The next slide actually shows that within the widow orphan market, most have annual demand of less than 1 metric ton, and about 30% of those need less than 100 kilos of API per year. So it's not much. It's often what we would turn out in a single batch, actually, but it's a sweet spot for us here in High Point, and it's something that we would like to continue to grow that capability. So who are we working with in this space? Well, High Point works primarily with a wide variety of clients. It's honestly a healthy mix of everyone from virtual startups to growing biotechs to big pharma. Since 1991, almost 40% of the orphan drug approvals by the FDA were awarded to big pharma, and the others have primarily gone to biotechs. An important factor here really is that these drugs are commonly targeting unmet medical needs. And so what that means is that these compounds are often fast-tracked by the FDA. That means that, sorry, next slide, please, that timelines are accelerated, the development windows are cut short. as a result of that. So our orphan drug candidate sponsors need a nimble, flexible, experienced, and aggressive CDMO partner that drives that critical innovation and speed to market launch. We recognize that's really the most important piece. You know, if you're comparing cost versus timeline, it's often timeline that's the driver there, and we do our best to help meet that need. So we hear it all the time. Even our partners with phase 1 clinical assets would like to come to us with the idea that they would like to just drop right into the metric ton commercial manufacturing site. And frankly, that's just not practical. It doesn't make a lot of sense. For one, the quality systems at a large metric ton manufacturing facility generally just aren't nimble enough for the research that has to occur with these orphan drugs on the scale. Second, the small and mid-scale capacity at these sites is reserved for engineering runs, and that's difficult. Those are for validated processes, compounds generally that are later in the commercial cycle. So really, this is an area that we feel that we can help quite a bit. Also, large sites traditionally, they just don't like to take on the smaller volume commercial products because return on investment is lower. The cost for labor is higher for a small volume commercial product. So we believe with our wheelhouse here at about 2,000 liter scale here in High Point, we have the wealth of talent to handle that sort of work, the chemistry, the engineering, the analytical that we talked about before. And it's key really to manufacture at the same site where the development was performed, to do the commercial at the same site where that development was done. There's much lower quality risk there. We also feel that keeping that nimble and flexible development cycle and tying that into your existing quality system really gives us an advantage over trying to do this work at some of our larger commercial manufacturing sites. And then really also just the ability to manage the increasing API demands as we add new indications or larger volumes. That's a really nice benefit of this. We have a lot of experience over the last several years of transferring projects to our larger commercial manufacturing sites. As these widow orphan compounds maybe become looking like more like blockbuster drugs, we have the ability to bring in our teams from the larger manufacturing sites. They can witness these engineering batches at 2,000 liter scale and really help to make a smooth transition and to move that to our larger manufacturing sites to easily revalidate in the 4,000 gallon equipment. So it's a win-win. We get the nimble approach here in High Point and the smooth transfer as the product adds API needs over the years. So really, with Premier Cambrex support, we've renovated about 85% of our site here in High Point, and Shawn will show you the evidence of that here in a bit. In doing so, I mentioned we're really lowering the risk. This is truly the same equipment in clinical manufacture as it is in commercial manufacture, and that's important for us. We don't want to have any risk going from the clinical to the manufacturing plant. Also, our quality system was built on the same platform as our larger sites in Iowa and Sweden. So that gives us very high confidence and success there. So with that, we believe that Cambrex High Point is really positioned well to support this growing market in small volume commercial manufacturing. And honestly, we'd love for each of you to come visit us here and see what we've done here. So with that, I'll hand it back to Shawn. He'll actually take a moment to show off the new facility.
Thanks, Dan. So now the focus on the last part here will be on exactly that, on the investments that have been put into the High Point facility to make what Dan just described a reality for ourselves and for the industry. We've wrapping up a two-phase expansion, and I'll have plenty of details on what that means here in the next couple of slides. The first phase was on essentially relocating, expanding, and modernizing the entirety of our R&D labs across the organization. That is the analytical, the chemistry, and the engineering R&Ds, as well as the quality control labs, with a new technology that are state-of-the-art to give that flexible, collaborative, and sustainable approach to development. Phase two is then the outfitting of the additional clinical and the commercial manufacturing suites, maintaining our flexibility from the overall capabilities of the equipment, but being able to expand our overall capacity and provide some additional offerings as well to our client base. So that first phase completed just over a year ago. You'll see in a couple of the slides, we have some maps, but one of the things I think that really speaks to the level of investment from Premier that Dan's mentioned a few times, and the general vision is that when we embarked on this journey to essentially remake the site, there was an agreement to be able to do a master site plan and make everything go with a natural workflow. So the first phase was taking and moving the entirety of those R&D labs, like I mentioned, into one facility to make room for the manufacturing space to grow. This new process chemistry lab, where you see a picture here, is a total of 73 hoods, most of which are assigned specifically to chemists, but we also have some with some specific technology aspects as well. All of the new facility has an energy efficient HVAC design to be able to minimize airflow, and in some situations take down our overall air demand to as low as 20% of the maximum amount, so that we can really minimize what our carbon footprint for such a large airflow with this R&D labs. We have a large array of walk-up instrumentation that's embedded in these labs, so that all of the chemists and engineers can get real-time analysis of their results and be able to get the instant feedback analytically, so that we can design and tailor the development processes that way without being limited with the throughput of competing with production for QC resources. The engineering lab is also there, which has large double-sided hoods I can show you pictures of. They're designed for access and stringing together multiple unit operations for a flow chemistry situation, has the same design. And we also have an additional analytical lab as well. We have the development scale-up labs, where we have the ability for multiple 100-liter reactors, which then allows us to do, in some cases, a last scale-up before we go to the plant. It may provide an opportunity for a non-GMP deliverable for a tox batch or something of that like, or the one last chance before we move back over to make sure that everything's been worked out with the process. And all of this has been connected with utility corridors, with mechanical rooms and the such, to be able to really facilitate the movement of the equipment, the materials, and the people to make an efficient workspace. So a few pictures to walk through is another angle of the looking down into the chemistry R&D group. Now here is a couple of images of the engineering lab, specifically with the continuous flow. You'll see in the right-hand picture, there's the traditional benches, benchtop hoods. But in the left picture, you can get an idea of these larger oversized hoods that I've mentioned, which are 12 feet long, 48 square foot per. There's 4 of those, access on both sides, and we can string between hoods so that you can have very large connected processes if there is a desire to telescope. We've run processes that have taken up multiple of these hoods, with as many as 3 telescoped reactions with the workup stages in between. So very, very complex systems. Again, the focus on what we do is, as Dan has mentioned, is being nimble and being flexible, continues as well with these labs as well, to try and maximize that flexibility to reconfigure equipment in the hoods on all scales to ensure that we are providing the best information and running the experiments in the best way to provide the highest level technical package going into the production facility. So phase 2 expansion is the additional expansion of our capacity. So we have 2 new clinical suites that are fully outfitted. One with a pair of 2,000-liter or 500-gallon reactors, the other with 800-liter reactors. We have other suites which are built out but do not have the reactors in it. And so that will be available for additional capacity as we continue to grow. All have the same technology that we talked about earlier, that low-level mixing, real-time level monitoring, tantalum heat exchangers, everything that you would expect from a flexible facility. Really speaks again to a point that Dan had mentioned, in that we have everything designed to be the same type of equipment in the old clinical suites, the new clinical suites, as well as the small volume commercial. so that the process that has run through phase 1, 2, 3 in the clinical space can then move directly into the commercial facility with no impact on concerns about the design of the agitation in the reactors, the aspect ratio of the reactors, or anything like that. So it's a seamless transition from a risk perspective and a technology perspective. Those 3 commercial suites have come on, the Pharma A, B, and C, you'll see in a minute. 2 of which have that pair of 2,000 liter, and we have one that is a 1,200 liter, 800 liter combination. One of the larger reactor suites has also been outfitted to go down to a higher level of containment, to a 0.1 by design, through the use of additional air handling, through the use of another agitated filter dryer, as well as sequestered gowning and degowning facilities for personnel exposure control. Same technology, low-level mixing and such, all with the state-of-the-art utilities and infrastructure to be able to control the reactors and the processes going within. And we've also added an additional 10,000 square foot climate-controlled warehouse for the storage of intermediates and finished goods that are coming out of this process. This is a map of our current facility. This is the new layout. And on the bottom there, you can see what I was describing, where all of the R&D functions are centrally located. Moving from the left to the right in the bottom, there's the engineering labs, there's the very large new chemistry lab, and then you can see the analytical R&D lab circling around the quality control lab. So everything is directly connected there, and it's very easy for that collaborative and communicative organization. We then move over to the top building, which is planned to be connected with that yellow connector building. Then you see in the top is all manufacturing. From the left, the green is the existing clinical space. We move then to the new clinical as well as the commercial space as well. So one connector will then be there to further facilitate the movement of materials throughout, but it's a very nice site plan from a workflow perspective, from materials, information, and people. This is a close-up on the that phase 2 build out, where you can see the clinical suites and so forth, a little bit closer detail. All the other things that may not be in a highlighted color are looking at locker rooms and office space and control room, mechanical rooms, and such along those lines. So everything has been thought of, and this is all brand new, fulfilling all of this area. It's a really exciting time to be launching this additional capacity. Here's a look at the suites. The first 4 we already saw earlier in the presentation, but then you see suite 8 and 9 coming on in the clinical space, as well as Pharma A, B, and C. Pharma A is the one that is to the higher level of containment, down to the 0.1 microgram per cubic meter. But again, you'll see again with the bullets, same technology throughout all of these suites. So then looking at commercial readiness, as we are making that transition from being strictly a clinical supplier to now being clinical and commercial, a big part of that is adding on to our resourcing and our personnel. From that, we have added a significant number of scientists. We've hired leadership from commercial facilities, including bringing people from our Charles City facility to lead the analytical program, looking at cleaning validations, to operations or manufacturing leadership, to lead the commercial aspect. So we have the people in place to go along with this facility to be able to hit the ground running when we start that first batch here in just over a month. We also, as Dan mentioned, going through mock audits to make sure that we are ready for a commercial FDA audit, and leaning on the existing robust quality infrastructure throughout Cambrex to be certain that that's going to be successful. We have multiple programs that we have been developing for some time that are ready to go into the commercial phase and are already slated to go into one of those suites, actually 2 of those suites, but we do have the additional capacity for more programs to be able to fill not just clinical, but commercial space moving forward. So as a recap here, we consider ourselves, even though we're just now starting, to really be that center of excellence for that small volume commercial. We can say that because we do have the larger Cambrex network to lean on from the commercial aspects, but the technology, the equipment, the processing, this is all stuff that we have been doing for a couple of decades and are very familiar with. And by minimizing those risks from a technology and a transfer perspective, we can deliver high quality commercial material in the small volume arena with very, very accelerated timelines, because everything being centrally located and minimizing the number of transfers that may have to occur between sites or between companies, so that we can be able to support those orphan indications or just those initial launches that a client may have in this 2,000 liter equipment. So these 50 to 100 kilo batches to be able to enable the next phases for our clients. We're excited that next week will actually be the ribbon cutting on this facility, and that we will ready to finish the qualification of all of these assets and start putting them into use and making this multi-year journey a reality. And so with that, I'd like to conclude and invite Dan to come back and be able to answer any questions that you might have in the audience. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for that presentation. A few people have submitted questions, so we're going to jump straight into those. First one is, what scale batch sizes can you make in the small volume commercial facility? Who wants to take that?
Yeah, sorry, Andrew, a little bit hard to hear there, but I think I heard you say what scale batches can we make in the facility. That ranges on the process, ranges on the throughput of a given process. Obviously, we try to optimize a process such that we have a maximized throughput for any given scale here in High Point. I mentioned, and Shawn showed, that we max out at about 2,000 liter capacity here in High Point, and traditionally that ranges from an upper end in kilos to about 75 to 100 kilos based on a given process. So for any given batch or campaign of material, we're making about 100 kilos. And for this small volume offering, we traditionally are telling clients that if you're expecting to make maybe less than 500 kilos a year, that it's probably a really good fit for the facility here in High Point.
Great, thank you. Hope you can hear better now. The second question we have is, do you have a technology transfer process for moving into commercial manufacturing?
Shawn, would you like to take that one or me?
I'm having a hard time hearing, so I'm working on volume here for a second.
All right, so I'll take it. It's the question, I believe, is a technology transfer process from clinical into commercial. And maybe I'll start and you can jump in, Shawn, but this is all by design. When Cambrex acquired the High Point facility just a few years ago, we recognized that really the mission was for High Point to be transferring processes from our facility to the larger commercial sites. And so we worked very hard, very intently on that process. The tech transfer, in our opinion, should feel seamless. It should be behind the scenes. Our clients should not feel the burden of additional cost and time and delays that go with a traditional site-to-site transfer. And so we worked very hard at that. And one of the key pieces there is making sure that we have the technical teams from our larger commercial sites actually coming on site and witnessing our engineering batches and sitting in the project team meetings and really just getting involved at an earlier stage than you might think with that more traditional transfer. And to me, the 3 or 4 programs that we send a year, that's probably the biggest attribute to success on that transfer. Shawn, anything to add there?
No, I think that describes it very well. Having that close connectivity between the sites allows us to be able to transfer those technologies with as minimum of a disruption and a time lag between the sites. And it's something that obviously we've used that as a template for internal transfers as well, as we start thinking about moving from clinical to commercial on site. But then having the ability to be, co-located, that timeline becomes even more accelerated to be able to go straight from clinical to commercial with a minimum amount of work.
Thank you. And finally, a much more broad question. What will be your 3 main take-home messages with respect to current trends in orphan and niche therapies?
Okay. Yeah, thanks. As I heard the question, it was, what are your 3 take-home messages with relation to doing the orphan technology type work, the widow orphan batches here in High Point? I think the key there, the characteristic, as I mentioned before, is speed to market. All of our clients have that line in the sand where they're New drug application has to be filed. We know that. But with these orphan compounds, that seems to be accelerated. We are seeing more and more that the timelines are more drastically compressed. There's never been a single campaign here, I think, where we weren't on critical path, and that's by design, and we can handle that pressure. We know that these compounds are fast-tracked, and we need to be doing work and thinking strategically to make sure that we're moving things through the system in an appropriate speed of development. Hand in hand with that, I guess, is a need to do more research on scale, is kind of how we think about it. These batches are all important. Every batch we learn something. There's often a change maybe in solvent volumes, or maybe how we handle the materials, how we implement wet milling, for example, as a way to control particle size. Each of these things are steady improvements that we're making in each iteration of the process to really dial this in and make sure that we're making API that fits the development cycle. Again, being an aggressive timeline, that's an important piece of it, is that iterative continuous improvement from batch to batch. The third piece, I guess, would be the propensity for clients to want to buy up activities based on that speed to launch. A good example there, in a traditional fit for purpose approach for a traditional development target, the analytical kind of runs hand in hand with our batch strategy, but we're finding more and more that with orphan type compounds, analytical needs are accelerated. We're trying to buy up analytical development and delivery. So we might be doing phase 3 readiness analytically for batches that are phase 1 and phase 2 support. And that's really just to try to get out ahead of that development curve. So for us, I think that's probably the 3 keys so far that we're seeing as trends in this industry. Shawn, anything to add there?
No, I think that's absolutely the case. I think the other part is just being able to have that capacity is important to the overall network. I think as you mentioned earlier on, getting to the point where you get out of the end of clinical and then you try to move to commercial and you don't have that network that has the available capacity, or you have capacity that's significantly oversized, is an incredible hurdle, I think, to a lot of these compounds actually making it to the next step. And so that's what we're trying to be able to help the clients with, is give them that pathway to make the compounds a reality and get them on the market to help the people that need it.
The last question we have is this one. What do you have in the way of HP API capabilities?
Shawn?
Sure. From a potency perspective, I mentioned on a majority of our facility is rated to 1 microgram per cubic meter, so I wouldn't consider that high potency by any stretch. But we do have, through the use of additional equipment that we connect to existing facilities or the new Pharma A that's coming online, I have the ability to go down to 0.1. And that's conservative in a lot of cases, and we're continuing to do additional industrial hygiene testing to see what measures we can put in place to enhance that even further. Obviously, the biggest risk profile is going to be around the handling of the dry product from an exposure and perspective. And so we've been a lot of focus on that with contained dispensing, with contained charging, with contained offloading along those lines. And so we're continuing to march down that path. So we have one specific room that is down to that level of 0.1. We have the rest of the facility that we can get down there as we need on a case-by-case basis. So we generally will do is look at each one of the processes that come through, especially in clinical phase, and do an assessment as to where the risk would be and what we can do to be able to manage that. If it does become something that becomes more aggressive as far as a need, our sister site in Charles City has just significant ample technology to be able to handle truly high potent materials on really any scale. So if it's not a fit for us with the technology that we've been put in and the improvements we're putting in, it's still a fit within the overall network.
Thank you. Well, on that note, I'm afraid we've run out of time. I'd like to thank our speakers, Dan Bowles and Shawn Conway, for that great presentation, and our sponsor, Cambrex, for making this event possible. On behalf of Cambrex and Sightline, have a productive remainder of the day, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.